Carp fishing is all about getting your rigs and bait over the same spot. So in this video, we want to answer the question, how does line stretch and hitting the clip affect your casting accuracy? .30 over 100 yard, 10.6 meters we pulled off before it started spinning. We're going to demonstrate how the way you hit the clip can really affect where your rigs land in relation to your bait. They must have been stretching a rod to 2 rod lengths further than the spot. Hello and welcome to our 4th instalment of Casting Secrets. This time around we're going to be looking at line stretch and how to hit that clip perfectly for maximum accuracy. So we're going to cover different diameters of line to determine the difference in stretch. We'll then compare that to a braid. We'll do a 5-ounce lead compared to a 3-ounce lead to determine how much further does that heavy lead stretch that mono. And at the end we're going to demonstrate how the way you hit the clip can really affect where your rigs land in relation to your bait. So first up, we're going to be testing line stretch. Now for this exercise, what we're going to be doing is testing 3 different diameters of line over 100 yard and 160 yard. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to put the rod on the bank sticks, we're going to walk the lead out to 100 yards, and I'm simply just going to pull the lead until that clutch starts spinning. And we're going to repeat the same process for a .40, a .35 and a .30, 3 different diameters of mono. After we've tested those, we'll jump onto the braid. As we know, there's no stretch in braid, but we just want to see how instantly it picks up and releases the line off that clutch. So a quick run through on how it's going to work. To try and keep everything as consistent as possible, we've locked the drag onto its full locked position, and then we've undone it 10 clicks, just so you've got, it's a tight clutch, but it's not, it's not overly tight. As you can see there, it's pulling line out, just to try and give us a consistent result really over the 3 different line diameters. I've literally just got a lead on the end just for something to hold on to. And so all I'm going to do is undo the bail arm. I'm going to walk it down to the 100 yard, tighten everything up. We'll clip the bobbin on just for a bit of a visual. And then I'm going to walk it back. I've got a tape measure down at the other end at 100 yard. And then the second this starts to click, I'm going to measure the distance. It's stretched. And then we're going to do the same with the other line diameters and the other distance, 160 yard, and compare between them. We're going to start with the thickest of the monos, which is the .40, which is a 20-pound line. They're going to do the 100 yard, and then while it's all set up, we're going to go straight to the 160, do the 2 tests with this line diameter, and then we'll work through, we'll step down to the .35, the .30, and then once we've done the mono, we'll go onto the braid and then compare all 4. Right, so we walked out to 100 yard. I'm going to walk it back. Second I get the heads up from Simon down the other end, I'm going to stop and I'm going to measure how much stretch is in it. We'll get a few indications on the alarms, no doubt we'll get a couple of beeps, but it's when that clutch starts spinning is what we're looking for. So I'll tease it back and see how far we get. Oh, there we go. Where are we? 4.9 meters. So exactly the same again. We're now at the 160 pole. Stretch this one out, see how much further than the 100 yard mark it goes. It's a bit more further than the other one. Oh! He's put his hand up. Where are we? We are 7.9 meters. Right, so that's line stretch done and dusted. So the distances that we pulled off the reels, over 100 yards to start with the 0.40. We pulled 4.8 meters of line off before the clutch started spinning, which is just over 5 yard. Then we went to 160 yards with the 0.40. We pulled 7.9 meters, which is 8.6 yard. Then we stepped down to the 0.35 mono. Over 100 yard was 5.7 meters, 6.2 yard. 160 yard was 8.7 meters, which is 9.5 yard. Now those two surprised me quite a bit. I wasn't expecting them to be so similar. There was less than a meter difference in each distance, which I thought was going to be a lot more than that, but it's very surprising. But the big surprise, and kind of what I expected to be, I didn't expect it to pull more in the thinner line. Obviously the thinner you go, I thought they were going to pull much further. But the 3.5 and the 4.0 being so close together was a bit surprising. 0.30 over 100 yard, 10.6 meters we pulled off before it started spinning, 11.6 yard. And then the big one, over 160 yards, we pulled 18.1 meters of line off, just under 20 yards worth of line before that clutch started spinning. So that is a massive, massive distance over that kind of range. And now we're going to put on Trakker's new Propel distance casting braid and also the spodded marker braid and compare those distances over 100 and 160 yard. Right, so we've just done the Propel distance braid. As you can see with the white cone, it moved 1 meter before the clutch started going. Now we've got the spodded marker braid. I'm assuming it's going to be pretty much exactly the same, but we're going to walk it back and have a little look. Simon's down the other end. He's going to give us the thumbs up when it starts ticking, so here we go. I can feel that tensioning straight away, exactly the same as the other one. There we go, hands up in the air. About the same distance, about a meter. There's not much in it, another same sort of pound line as well, so I'd imagine it's going to be the same for the 160. So we'll have a walk down there now and see how that one goes. So that rounds up the braided section. Now both of them were identical in stretch, which was pretty much 0. The first one, the Propel distance braid, was 1 meter on the 100 yard mark before it started to move. And then on the 160 yard mark, it was 1.8 meter. And the spodded marker braid was exactly the same. So now what we're going to find out is how does that affect hitting the clip. So to do that, we're going to cast a spom out there at 100 yard, mark a reference point on the ground, do the same at 160 yard. And then with each 3 of those diameter monos, we're going to do 3 casts with each one and just see if there's any spring back once it hits the clip as to where the spom landed. Right, so we've just done 3 casts using a spom, weighted out to about 6 ounce, typical of what your sort of average spom would be. Clipped it up 100 yard, did 4 or 5 casts. That's the sort of average distance where they've all been landing. We've put a 10-foot square box maybe. And what we're going to do now, like I said before, we're going to use the 3 different diameters of line. I'm going to do 3 casts with each one. I'm going to use another spom just as a bit of a visual so you can see where they're landing, but it's going to be weighted out to about 4.5 ounce, your sort of long range lead size. So yeah, it should be interesting to see if we get any stretch or spring back, should I say, with the different size monos. We've just set up the 100 yard box, as you saw, 10-foot square, and I did about 5 or 6 casts with a 4.5 ounce spom, how I thought I'd be fishing in a fishing situation. I hit the clip pretty nice, and they weren't springing back, they weren't too hard. I felt like they were just perfect. As they were hitting the clip, they were bouncing back and they were actually landing short. So we had a walk down, me and Simon had a little chat. We've done about 3 or 4 more casts, hit him a little bit harder than what I normally would. And it turns out they were springing past the spot, and as the stretch was coming out of the line, they were actually landing further than the spot, and then as the stretch come out, they pulled back and landed perfectly within that box. So in a fishing situation, they would have landed past the spot, and as that's going through the water column to the bottom, the stretch is going to come out of the line and then it is going to land on the spot. So hitting the clip a little bit harder, for me personally, is what I've learned in this test so far. We're going to move on to the 160 yard and see how we get on with that. Obviously everything's going to be exaggerated because there's going to be more stretch, there's further distance, but we'll get those 3 casts done now and give you an update in a sec. So just a quick note, that was the 0.40 that we tested then. And what we decided to do, because the 0.40 and the 0.35 were so close, we're not going to bother testing that on the casting test. We're just going to go from the 0.40 straight to the 0.30. That's going to give us the biggest difference. So we're going to jump onto the 160 yard now and let you know how we get on in a sec. Right, so I'll give you a quick roundup of that section of the video where we was hitting the clip at different ranges. Now, as you saw, we set a couple of boxes out with the spawn rod at 100 yard and 160 yard, about a 10-foot box. We averaged out 3 casts with each one to give us a reference point. Now we've been casting a fishing rod with a 4.5 ounce spawn, tried to make it land in those boxes at those 2 different ranges with the 2 different diameters of line. Now the 0.40 was the one we started on. We did 4 or 5 casts, and what we found, they were all landing short of the box. And that was my sort of average cast, how I like to fish, where I felt it would have been good to be the same distance as the spawn rod, but it turns out it was short. As I put a little bit more power into the cast, hit it a little bit harder, they were then landing in the box. So for me personally, I've took away, hit it a little bit harder, not too hard because you don't want it to spring back. It's hard to give you an exact formula with this sort of thing. It's a bit of, need a bit of practice, you know, a bit of experience, and it'll only come with time. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. But as a rule of thumb, just hit it that little bit harder with a thicker line. Then we moved on to the thinner line, the 0.30, 5 or 6 casts with each one. And this, obviously, as you'd expect, with the line being a little bit thinner, they sprung past the spot, and then they were bouncing back. I don't think they were stretching past the spot as much as the original test we did at the start, where we was testing for maximum stretch. I'd say they were stretching past maybe 2 rod lengths past the spot, maybe a bit shorter, and then they were springing back, and then they were landing in the box. Now the biggest thing to take away from it is the difference in stretch compared to the 2 lines under the cast. As I said before, you do need to hit it a little bit harder with a thicker line and a little bit softer with a thinner line. I know it sounds obvious that it's common sense. You think with a line being so thin, it is going to stretch further. I do a lot of distance casting, and it makes me wonder how I actually catch fish, because the difference in casts each time, they were very inconsistent. You know, you have to be hitting the clip perfectly every time, and you've got a gust of wind, increases your cast, you've got a crosswind. It surprises me how we catch fish. We will cover this more a little bit in the conclusion of the video, but for now, we're going to move on to our next test, which is going to be a heavy lead versus a light lead. I'm just going to see if it does make a difference in the stretch as to where it lands. So that's the 3 ounce versus the 5 ounce complete. Now, as you can see behind, this is the box we was aiming in. It's around a 10-foot square. The white cones represent the 5 ounce lead, and the yellow cones represent the 3 ounce lead. And what we was finding, we started off first with the 3 ounce lead. As we was hitting the clip, again, I treated this like a fishing situation, as if I was out on the bank, I hit the clip exactly how I'd think would be necessary. So I've hit the clip. It's not stretched too much, obviously there's not too much weight in it. We was using the 0.30 line. Stretched a little bit and then pretty much landed exactly where they are. Now with the 5 ounce lead, they must have been stretching a rod to 2 rod lengths further than the spot. So they were landing on the grass further back, and then the stretch in the line was absorbed, and then they'd fly back, and that's where the finishing position was once the stretch had come out of the line. So in terms of accuracy, I don't think there's much difference in the lead sizes. I think the only time it would come into play is if you was fishing maybe a shallow lake and the lead hit the floor before the line had time to contract and shrink back to its normal state. So that's a question I can't really answer, unfortunately. I think that's an underwater video. But in terms of what we've done, I don't think there's too much difference in the leads. Obviously, comes into action how hard you hit the clip, which brings us on to our next sort of topic of this video. I'm going to demonstrate how I like to hit the clip, and then we're going to demonstrate what happens if you hit the clip with your rod forward opposed to hitting your rod back, and show you the variances in distance hitting the clip in different positions. So the box that we got set out there at 100 yard is set up for my casting technique and how I like to hit the clip. So what I'm going to do is change the way I hit the clip to show you how different it is compared to how I like to cast and where I hit the clip. So to start with, I'm going to just hold the rod all the way back, let it hit the clip, and then I'll take the slack out, which looks something like this. Right, that's the first one done. This time around, I'm going to hit the clip with the rod pointing forward, this sort of direction, about a 45 degree. I am going to drop it again to try and take the slack out. There's not going to be much room to drop it, but I'm going to finish there, see how we get on. So cast number 3, I'm going to finish a rod where I normally like to finish, which is pretty much upright. Not quite 90 degrees, but you know, not far off 90 degrees. But what I'm going to do this time, instead of letting the slack out, I'm just going to hit it on a tight line and just see where it lands. So it pulled the rod forward a tiny bit, but it'll be interesting to see how it's done. Right, and for the final cast, this is how I like to hit the clip. I'll do my cast, I'll hold the rod upright. As I hit the clip, I'll drop the rod, take the slack out, and just as it's about to hit the water, I'll tighten up. If I was on a lake, I'd then be feeling my lead down. It goes a little bit something like this. Hopefully that should be in the middle. Perfectly in the middle, just as I thought it was going to be. If I was in a fishing situation, that would be my left hand rod to the left of the spot. But the one thing I wanted to take away from it was this was the distance that I was looking to achieve, and I was perfectly in line with the distance. So if I was spomming and they were going a little bit left and right in the line, how I like to spom, that would have been perfectly over the bait. So you can see the difference in where you hit the clip. Hasn't been massive, half a rod length, but they're all still in the square. But it is important that you are consistent where you hit the clip. But the main thing to take away from it is wherever you're spomming and your fishing rods hitting the clip, be consistent with both of them. You don't want to hit your spom one way and then hit your fishing rod the other way, because they're just going to be all over the place. Not be miles out, but they won't be as effective as you could be. The following morning, he joined us down the lake. We was just about to talk you through the summary and give you the conclusion of yesterday, and my left hand rod burst into life with this stunning upper double. So I'll get this back and I'll run you through all the results from yesterday and how we get on. So a few vital points to take away from this video. When you're snag fishing, use the thickest line you possibly can, even if you're fishing at range. If you can use that thicker line and still fish at range, it's going to be much safer and much more chances of landing the fish. Also, if you're using a thicker line, you have to hit that clip that little bit harder in order to land more effectively on your spot. Almost even add a slight little bit of distance on your fishing rod to counteract that. When it comes to hitting the clip, you need to make sure you're releasing the tension on that line to eradicate the stretch as much as possible, so you're landing much more efficient on your bait. And lastly, never neglect your marker float and a bit of marker elastic. It's a massive edge, especially if you're on the lake where you're with a mate maybe and you can walk around the side. If you can put your marker float out and then get him to watch you do a couple of casts with your fishing rod to see if you're landing over that spot, short, long, it's a massive edge. It give you a perfect guide on what distance you're fishing to make you much more accurate. And as always, comments and questions are more than welcome. Stick them in the section below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you in the next one.